Honourable members, the prayer. Lord, the God of righteousness and truth, grant to our King, to his government, to members of the Legislative Assembly, and to all in positions of responsibility, the guidance of your Spirit. May they never lead the province wrongly, through love of power, desire to please, or unworthy ideas, but laying aside all private interest and prejudice, keep in mind their responsibility to seek to improve the condition of all. Amen. Honourable members, it being Thursday, we will now be led in the singing of God Save the King by Mr. Michael Peters.
God save our gracious King, long live our noble King. God save the King. Send him victorious, happy and glorious, long to reign over us. God save the King.
Be seated.
Introduction of visitors.
Honourable members, today I have the great pleasure of introducing a former member and a good friend of mine, Mr. Mark Smith. He was elected the 896th member ever to be elected to the Assembly. He represented the constituency of Drayton Valley, Devon from 2015 to 2023. I invite him to rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly. It's also my honor and privilege to introduce a very special visitor joining us to my gallery today. Mr. Ethan Williams is a member of the Didsbury Town Council and a very dear friend of mine, who just happens to also work in the outstanding constituency office of Olds Didsbury Three Hills. I first met Ethan in 2016 when he was a senior in high school. Following his graduation from Olds College in 2018, he interned with the official opposition, and our friendship grew. As the youngest councillor in Didsbury's history, he brings a perspective that is valued by his colleagues and his constituents. As a value member of my team, he's someone who always makes sure I am wearing pants. I ask him to please rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
Introduction of guests.
The Honourable Member for Sherwood Park has a school group.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To you and through you to the members of the Assembly, it's my pleasure to introduce to you the 42 grade 9 students from New Horizons School in Sherwood Park. This school is extremely successful, bursting at the seams, and Minister, it is ready for a high school. Students, will you please rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly?
The Honourable Minister of Municipal Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to introduce to you and through you Andrew Ferguson, a 14-year-old grade 9 student at New Horizons Charter School in Sherwood Park. Andrew is an avid hockey and baseball player, and he is the son of my deputy minister. Andrew, please rise and receive the traditional warm welcome of the Assembly.
The Honourable Member for Camrose.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and happy Diwali, everyone. I'm glad to rise and introduce to you and through you Harry Rowat, who is the Vice President Programming from the Hindu Society of Alberta, the first ever Hindu temple in the province, built in 1967. I'd like to congratulate Mr. Rowat and the team for organizing an excellent Diwali event, and thank you for hosting us last night.
The Honourable Member for Drayton Valley, Devon.
Mr. Speaker, it's my honor and pleasure to introduce to you and through you Regina Hansen, Valentina Martins from town of Devon. Valentina is a teacher and Regina serves on the school board. They both are strong advocates for the safety and well-being of children in our province. Please rise and receive a warm welcome of this Assembly.
Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I'm happy to rise to introduce Tiffany Gillis, a strong supporter of our province's oil and gas industry, a parent of 2 school-aged children, and an advocate for strengthening parents' involvement in their education. I'm also happy to introduce Mike McMahon, Superintendent, of Fort Vermilion School Division. I ask that they both rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
The honourable member for Edmonton Northwest.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to introduce my constituent Marnie Panas. She's an incredible trans advocate, lifelong Albertan and inclusion professional, and her partner Shane McLean, a surgical resident. Please rise and join me.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to rise and introduce to you and through you to all members of the Assembly, Cameron Friesen, former member of the Manitoba Legislative Assembly, former Minister of Health, Seniors and Active Living, Finance, and Justice and Attorney General. As well, I want to thank our special guest, Ms. Kelly Lynn Peary, for joining us today, and a special shout out to my friend Sheila Cunningham. Please all rise and receive the warm welcome.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Decore.
Mr. Speaker, it's my great pleasure to introduce you and through you to the members of the Assembly, Dunia Noor, President and founder of African Canadian Civic Engagement Council, Habiba Shouria, who does a great work in our schools, and Emmanuel Ona. They all do a fantastic work to create an inclusive society and a loving neighborhoods in our communities. I ask them to raise and receive the traditional warm welcome of the Assembly.
The Honourable Member for Red Deer South.
Happy Diwali, Mr. Speaker. It's good to celebrate good over evil. I introduce Savita Patel, a community servant for over 30 years, representing today Purnima Chaudhry Thermi Foundation and Center for Performing Arts. Please rise and accept the warm welcome of this legislature.
The Honourable the Government House Leader has an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to introduce to you and through you 2 constituents of mine, Hannah and Dave Pilling. They're amazing people, and Hannah herself was just awarded Rookie of the Year for ACAC, Female Athlete of the Year. I'd ask them to rise and please receive the warm welcome of this Assembly.
The Honourable Member for Grand Prairie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to introduce to you and through you and to all members of the Legislative Assembly, my guests from the Hindu Society of Beaumont. They are President Yash Sharma and Treasurer Shikhar Desi Gadab. Please rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
The Honourable Member for Livingston MacLeod.
Hi, Mr. Speaker. I rise to introduce to you and through you 3 amazing constituents, Shane, Rhonda, and Anea, who is part of the Youth Minister Council for Education. I ask that you please rise and receive the traditional warm welcome of this Assembly.
The Honourable Member for Chestermere Strathmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my honour to introduce to you and through you a group here from PAC, Parents and Kids Together, here to show support for the important legislation our government is bringing forward today to protect children and their future choices. Please rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
The Honourable the Minister of Arts, Culture and the Status of Women.
Mr. Speaker, it's my honour to introduce to you and through you to all members of the Legislative Assembly, several friends of ours, Taylor Elliott, James Decker, Lois Cardinal, Jason Brandick, Blaine Badiak, Tiffany Gillis. Please rise and receive the warm welcome of this Assembly.
Are there others? The Member for Laxane and Parkland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm honored to rise today and introduce to you and through you friends from near and far that came over here to talk about the potential Sukuk financing for major projects and economic corridors. From the Kuwait Financial House, Mohammed Sapib and Iqbal Mohammed. From Denton Financial, Mike Harris, Peter Inglis, Keith Hannell, Robert Bothwell, and from the Prairies Crossing Group, Ahmed Mohammed, Mohammed Bini, Imrad Said, and Dr. Habib Mohammed. I apologize, folks. I'd like to request you to rise and please receive
the Honourable Minister of Children and Family Services.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to introduce to you and through you to all members of the legislature, my good friend Spencer Bennett from the amazing riding of Spruce Grove Stony Plain. He's a local teacher, a good friend, and a great supporter. Please rise and accept the warm welcome of this Assembly.
Ministerial statements. Member statements.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Elbow has a statement to make.
Thank you, Mr.
Speaker, I rise here today to mark the many celebrations on October 31st, 2004 in the Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist and Jain communities, including over 200,000 Albertans and over 1.3 billion people worldwide. For so many Albertans, and myself, today is a holy day, a day that highlights the values of our faith and brings together family, friends and community. Hindus across our province are celebrating Diwali, or Deepawali, the Festival of Lights. It celebrates the victory of good over evil and light over darkness, honoring Lord Rama on his return after 14 years of exile upon defeating the demon king Ravana. It is a day that reminds us all to celebrate light, joy, and unity. Sikhs across our province are celebrating Bandi Chhor Divas, the Day of Liberation. It marks the release of Guru Hargobind Sahib Ji and 52 other prisoners from Gwalior Fort in 1619. It is a celebration that commemorates justice, selflessness, and freedom, values paramount not just to the Sikh faith, but to all of us. On this day, friends and families come together to share meals, exchange gifts, light diyas, and decorate their homes. The symbolism of this day, the triumph of light over darkness, of good over evil, reminds us of the values that we must continue to strive for as Albertans. As we mark Diwali and Bandi Chhor Divas, I also want to recognize the immense contributions of the Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist, and Jain communities in building Alberta. Across sectors, industries, communities, urban and rural, they are leaders. My parents arrived here in the 60s and were part of a generation that built a strong, vibrant Hindu community in Alberta, and I am so proud of each and every single one of them. On behalf of my caucus and the official opposition, I wish everyone celebrating a very happy Diwali, a very happy Lakshmi Pujan today, and Bandi Chhor Divas. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint Anne Parkland has a statement to make.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased that the government review of the Alberta's regulated professions is underway. And I and other members of this House have heard from regulated professionals and regulatory bodies may be going too far in limiting freedoms of expression. We're initiating this review in response to increasing concerns that professional bodies are going too far in limiting individual freedom of expression and imposing compulsory training beyond the scope of their professional practice. And in some cases, regulated professionals are even facing actual discipline. We're concerned that this has led to self-censorship, a chilling effect on professionals, the ability to speak and express themselves freely. Mr. Speaker, these concerns must be addressed. These hard-working Albertans must be confident in the expertise and the ethics of the regulated professional bodies. Professional regulatory bodies play an important role in protecting the public interest by setting standards of competence and conduct for their members and disciplining those who fail to meet them. However, professionals must be free to express their personal opinions and beliefs when not practicing or representing that profession. This is a matter of protecting Alberta's civil rights, Mr. Speaker. Organizations that regulate professionals must strike a balance that upholds the competence and the ethics without restricting members' rights and freedoms, and we are working to ensure that that balance is met. This review is an important first step in considering whether legislative changes are needed to clarify that professionals' regulatory bodies are limited in regulating members' professions' competence behavior. I'm pleased that our government is gathering input from regulated professionals, their regulatory bodies, and other associations and experts on how any potential changes would impact the role of regulatory bodies that they play. This review would ensure Alberta's rights and freedoms are protected, Mr. Speaker. I'm looking forward to the outcome, and I'm sure a number of my colleagues are. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton City Centre has a statement to make.
Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary o'er another troubling transcript of a UCP town hall, as I sat there mildly cursing, both my mind and heart were hurting to read the Premier half affirming truths that were not truths at all. 'Tis quite a thing, I muttered, to see a leader caught in such a thrall with no shame, no, none at all. It was, I do remember, in the month before September that the Premier blew on embers of conspiracies galore, like that vaccines were actually deadly, for young children especially, and strange deaths increasing readily, people dying by the score. And though the facts did not support it, she said it's something she'd explore. Members spoke about immigration and the pace of its inflation, claimed Ukrainians we welcomed led to swastikas in our street, said to access to ivermectin should have no peer-reviewed direction, just the feeling of a single doc who'd do just as they please, and claimed that teachers in our school handed out pornography. And we know it's been a pattern. It's been more than just a smattering of occasions when the premiers flirted with conspiracies, like that people commit arson to frame burning hydrocarbons for non-existent climate change so they can force through policies, and that planes are spraying chemicals to bring us to our knees. Now, I'd laugh, but it's not funny. Millions in public money are being spent now just because this government's pandering to this, creating binding legislation based on lies, misinformation that will, in its application, hurt real people in our midst, breaking systems we depend on for their gain and benefit. And I think it's cold and callous, almost bordering on malice for a government to encourage this. It's something to abhor. But I know we can have better, and we're working hard to get there with our leader, Naheed Nenshi, in 3 years, in 24. Albertans, well, they'll have the chance to vote for something more. Yes, they'll vote for something more and tell this premier nevermore.
For Tabor Warner has a statement to make.
Mr. Speaker, government's primary and first responsibility is to protect its people. When civilizations first made their collective decisions to forego a portion of their individualistic tendencies and band together, it was with the intent to add a measure of protection to their families and societies as a whole. Today, governments across the globe have expanded their scope and practice. Working together for a common goal has on whole, benefited humanity and has enriched a civilized society. But we should never forget the primary reason why we first formed governments, and that was, and still is, to protect its people. In Canada, the criminal element has sadly been empowered by bad federal bail legislation and liberalized drug policies. We in the provinces have been begging for federal liberals for bail reform. In Alberta, we have embraced a holistic approach to breaking the bands of drug addiction through our recovery-oriented approach. It is not compassionate nor humane to facilitate or prolong another's drug addiction. I have lived in rural Alberta for most of my life, Mr. Speaker. It is a peaceful and serene life. It's a great place to raise a family, but the criminal element has learned how to operate in rural Alberta, and that is of great concern to me. One Albertan told me he is a heavy-duty mechanic and operates out of his Quonset on his acreage. He has been broken into so many times, Mr. Speaker, and his tools stolen that his insurance won't insure him anymore. So now he sleeps in the Quonset to protect his livelihood. Mr. Speaker, the government has failed this man and his family, and I submit we have deviated from our long tradition of successfully protecting our people. If we fail to help our people feel safe, to live and work and enjoy their property, then our primary reason for forming governments has been lost. I believe we can and must do better for our people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear. The honourable member for Edmonton Riverview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is Halloween. This is a day where darkness reigns and evil lurks. Instead of suppressing the troubling aspects of our society, Halloween is a day to reveal them. That's why today is the perfect day to talk about continuing care. Many disturbing events are occurring inside the halls of facilities throughout Alberta. Hellish events include neglect, violence, and even acts of sexual violence. Odor, mold, and improper food handling practices are other gruesome shortcomings too often occurring in continuing care. All these are compromising the health of seniors. These are dreadful circumstances. In addition, seniors are afraid to leave their rooms because of dangerous situations in their hallways. Some report feeling terrorized by ghoulish circumstances. Yet the UCP, instead of mitigating the circumstances, cruelly ignores them. Alarming, this is for sure. Strangely, the UCP make administrative changes rather than dealing with the haunting reality. Moving continuing care from Health Ministry to the Seniors and Community Social Services Ministry does nothing to address this dangerous situation. Horrendously as well, the new continuing care legislation has eliminated the minimum daily care hours for seniors. This grisly truth gives no support to families worried about their loved ones' care. The minister alarmingly says she wants to be flexible for providers. Excuse me, Mr. Speaker, what about seniors? The nightmare continues for families. Their concerns about lack of care cannot be legislated as no minimum daily hours are identified. On this Halloween, I'm imploring the UCP to stop these horrors. It's time to shine the light on continuing care by ensuring the needs of seniors are paramount. Seniors deserve high-quality care. It is the responsibility of the UCP to make this happen.
Honourable members, some of you may have noticed a new face at the table this afternoon. Although not new to the legislature, new to the table. Vani Govindarajan will be spending some time in the chamber learning about the duties of a table officer. She has done a wonderful job working in Parliamentary Council from 2012 and 2013. She, as a law student at that time, she then joined the Legislative Assembly office full-time as legal counsel in 2018 and was promoted to Parliamentary Counsel in 2022. Vani has a Bachelor of Arts degree and Juris Doctor from the University of Alberta, Master of Arts degree from Carleton University. I hope that you will all join me in welcoming her to her new role. Honorable members, the time is now 1:50, and that makes it oral question period. And the leader of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition has question 1.
Mr. Speaker, Alberta's nurses deserve way more respect than this government shows them. In a vote last night, nurses rejected this government's offer. They voted 60% opposed. Nurses are done with the lack of respect while this government leaves our healthcare system in disarray. The UCP has introduced too much instability with their privatization disguised as reorganization, and Alberta nurses have had it. Will the Premier admit that a huge rejection from nurses on their contract means that she's failed to show them respect?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The United Nurses of Alberta did reject a mediator's report for a new labour agreement. We are disappointed in that result. Even though both parties recommended accepting the mediator's report early this morning, they announced that their membership voted to reject the recommendations. The majority of locals agreed. The majority of members did not, and they do have a double majority. I think it's unfortunate because it would have made Alberta's registered nurses the highest paid in Canada, create more capacity by hiring 1,000 new graduates, and we hope that they'll get back to the table.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, what I'm hearing from nurses is that this is about respect. We've just learned that 48% of nurses leave the profession when they turn 35. The government chases nurses out of their own jobs. And so it's really not a surprise that nurses are so motivated. Last night's vote had over 75% turnout. Every local in the province voted. The UCP seems to love to fight with unions because they don't believe in supporting working people like our nurses, who are the heroes of our healthcare system. Will this government agree to get back to the bargaining table and negotiate a fair contract with the Alberta nurses with respect that they deserve?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I understand it, the mediator's recommendations would have made Alberta nurses the highest paid in Canada, would have created more capacity by hiring 1,000 new graduating nurses into full-time positions, tripled investment into recruiting to rural and remote healthcare locations. It sounds like a great investment for individual nurses and a great investment for the healthcare system, and I encourage the UNA to work with its members so that we can find a solution. I think part of the frustration may have come from the fact that when the other guys were in charge, they got 0, 0, and 0.
Ooh. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I think the Premier and her government don't understand that it's not about the dollars, it is about respect. The government showed nurses no respect when they left NICUs understaffed. Yep. They showed nurses no respect when they failed to hire the physicians and support staff needed to give nurses relief. Every shift, nurses are rushed off their feet. It's time that this government finally listen to healthcare workers across Alberta. What is the government's plan to show nurses and all healthcare professionals the respect that they deserve?
Hear, hear. The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Giving nurses pay increases that make them the highest paid in the country looks to me like respect. Having 1,000 more full-time nurses hired out of school to address the issues of being able to have enough staff in our hospitals, that looks like respect. What doesn't look like respect is what we saw under those guys. In 2017, 0% increase. 2018, 0% increase. 2019, 0% increase. We are trying to correct the errors of the government in the past.
The Honourable, the Leader of the Official Opposition for a second set of questions.
Mr. Speaker, something happened these last 6 months because the Premier's priorities are completely out of step with Albertans. During the Oilers playoffs, the Premier and at least 5 of her cabinet ministers attended games in box seats with none other than the company that bought us the completely failed Turkish Tylenol. It's only because of investigative journalism, not government accountability and transparency, that Albertans even know which cabinet ministers went. Can the Premier tell Albertans today which cabinet ministers attended these box seats for playoff hockey games?
The Honourable, the Premier.
Why, thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you know, we have a requirement with the Ethics Commissioner that any time we attend as an invited guest, we have to report it to them. I've gone to games, I've gone to derbies, I have gone to air shows, I've gone to rodeos, and many of my members have as well. This is part of the job. And the Ethics Commissioner, I expect every one of our members to report, and the Ethics Commissioner has not raised any issues with me, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, all of this might have been old news had the Premier simply released the list of every cabinet minister and staffer who accepted these expensive tickets, because the reality is the only reason that she is actually meeting the ethics requirements is because she changed them to lower the bar to a standard Albertans don't find acceptable. The Premier said Invest Alberta hosted her, but when we wrote to Invest Alberta, they said, quote, "I can confirm Invest Alberta did not host or pay for Premier Smith or any elected officials to attend NHL playoff games," end quote. Will she end this scandal today and come out with the truth?
The Honourable, the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I said a board member of Invest Alberta had hosted me at the game in Vancouver, Explore Edmonton in Edmonton, as well as the Oilers group. But we're only syncing up our system with the same one that they have in Calgary, where their unelected leader included box seats to watch the Calgary Flames in April 2015, single ticket from the ATCO to see the Flames in 2014, more Flames tickets in March 2017, tickets to a Western Final football game, multiple tickets for opera, ballet, Cirque du Soleil, theatre, showed at his tenure as mayor. Oh yeah, plus tickets to an Olympic soccer game in England, Mr. Speaker.
Order. The Honourable, the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, every day it's more of the same. We ask for accountability from this Premier, and she talks about Justin or she talks about Ned. These are people she can't stop thinking about. She has changed the rules for her own benefit, and Albertans watched it happen. She has no problem with her ministers and political staff hobnobbing in luxurious box seats with the company behind Turkish Tylenol, and now there are new rumors about just who's funding the shady new PAC that popped up this week called Alberta Conservative Action Fund. So why won't she come clean, own up to it, and tell Albertans who attended?
The Honourable, the Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, you know what else is a job expected of elected politicians, particularly elected leaders? It's to hold a seat in this legislature. That is why I encourage some accountability on the other side. I would love to be asking questions to the unelected leader of the NDP, and there are a couple more days left before one of the members across, there's 37 of them, to step down, do the right thing, so that their leader can come in here and be accountable to the public for the position that he now holds.
Order. The Honourable Member for Edmonton Rutherford has a question to ask.
Mr. Speaker, Albertans deserve much more transparency than what this government has offered on these hockey tickets. The Premier's office told media 6 months ago that all expenses were paid back. They said that their staff, quote, paid both their own expenses. That statement was on May 13th. Mr. Speaker, a Freedom of Information inquiry shows that is not true. The Premier's office didn't even request the invoice for the expenses until May the 15th. Why did the Premier's office tell the public these expenses were already repaid when that's simply not the case?
The Honourable the Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, as the Premier just mentioned just a few moments ago, all of the rules have been followed by ministers and staff, and the Premier, in fact, herself will happily work with the Ethics Commissioner and the Ethics Commissioner's office if there are any disclosures that are required. As far as we can tell, all ministers have disclosed their attendances and all have complied with the Conflict of Interests Act, and none of those are an issue as of today.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Rutherford.
After 6 months, we know at least 5 ministers took tickets from the same company that brought us the Turkish Tylenol. The finance minister went to these games. The deputy premier went to one game. The minister of affordability and utilities went to a game. The tourism and sport minister went but refused to say who paid for the ticket. And only yesterday, the infrastructure minister owned up to a ticket as well. To the premier, which other cabinet ministers did she give permission to take free box seat tickets to these hockey games?
Point of order is noted at 2 o'clock. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I think the opposition member has to take yes for an answer. All of the rules on the Conflict of Interest Act have been followed by the ministers. We often attend various events. We attend events that contribute to Alberta's success, to its culture, and to its liveliness. And unlike the members opposite, Mr. Speaker, we engage with our communities. We're proud of what the Oilers did this past season. We're looking forward to seeing them do that again, and we will support everybody in this province on this side of the House.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Rutherford.
Mr. Speaker, this whole thing is embarrassing. The Premier's best years at Take Back Alberta are furious because David Parker wrote, "Corruption seems to have seized the whole office," end quote. Mr. Speaker, this government took box seats to Oilers playoffs that a lot of Albertans would have loved to have attended. It is time for honesty and transparency. Will the Premier table the names of every minister that took the tickets, and when the Oilers get to the playoffs this year, will she guarantee no one, not her staff, not her cabinet, will take tickets from her insiders?
The point of order is noted at 2:02. The Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, the only thing embarrassing are the events that the unelected leader of the NDP attended during his time as mayor in Calgary. Box seats to watch the Calgary Flames in April of 2015. A single ticket from Matco to see the Flames in 2014. More Flames games in March of 2017. Tickets to a Western final football game, Mr. Speaker. Multiple tickets to the opera, ballet, Cirque du Soleil, and theatre shows during his tenure as mayor. And finally, Mr. Speaker, an Olympic soccer game in England. That's the only shameful thing in this House,
Order.
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Whitemud has a question.
Mr. Speaker, Halloween seems like the perfect day to remind the Premier that Alberta families are haunted by the highest auto insurance rates in the country. Since the UCP lifted the NDP's rate cap in 2019, premiums have spiked by 30%, terrifying Albertans more than any ghost story ever could. This government's so-called caps are doing nothing to lower real costs for anyone. Will the Premier admit her government's policies have failed Albertans and left them holding nothing but an empty bag of tricks?
The Honourable the Minister of Finance, the President of Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, no decisions on auto insurance reform have been made at this time, but they will be made shortly, and we will announce our changes by the end of the year. As this House knows, we engaged Oliver Wyman to commission a study and NOUS to look at the impacts different systems would have on the province. We know that Albertans are expecting long-term reforms. That's what we've promised them. We will also have to deal with probably more short-term changes as well, there's 17 to 19% pressure built up in the system.
The honourable member for Edmonton, Whitemud.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Albertans wish that this government pay attention to the cost of living and the affordability crisis that they're facing with the same level of urgency that the Premier attends to chemtrails in this province. So, Mr. Speaker, the truth is that Alberta drivers pay the highest auto insurance premiums in Canada, $770 more on average than drivers in Manitoba, BC, or Saskatchewan. These provinces prove that better models exist. In fact, the UCP's own report, which came out ages ago, said the public insurance options can bring real savings for drivers, yet they've done little to help Albertans. When will they take meaningful action? No more delays, Minister. Please take some action now for Albertans.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the part of that question I'll agree with is that the reports have shown is that there's more affordable models out there, and that's what we're pursuing. Need to understand that system change like that will require time. It requires a lot of consultation, but it also requires time to change IT systems. So all of those things are being considered while we can consult with industry, but I can assure you we're doing this from the Albertans' perspective. That's the way it was put in my mandate letter, that Albertans demand lower insurance rates, and that's our focus.
Honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, the only thing that seems to take time for this government is to take action for Albertans. They seem to waste no time to take action for their party's members. Mr. Speaker, Alberta not only has the highest auto insurance rates, but we also have the longest hospital wait times, the lowest per student funding, and the slowest wage growth in Canada. While the UCP is focused on chemtrails and conspiracy theories and punching down on vulnerable youth, they've left Alberta families in the dark. Will the Premier admit that her policies have created nothing but a house of horrors for everyday Albertans who are dying for a reasonable, competent government?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we're focused every day on the needs of Albertans. I think that's why we're all here. We can agree on that. And I'm never going to say that there isn't challenges in this province. There is some sincere challenges, and we're seeing them right across the country, in healthcare, in education. We're seeing them in housing costs. And yet people from across the country and around the world continue to flock to Alberta. That says something in and of itself. We will work every day to make life better for Albertans, keeping that perspective as our own. But we should be thankful we're here, and let's all work together to make it better.
The Honourable Member for Sherwood Park.
I'm haunted by the memory of the Minister of Municipal Affairs standing in this House and committing that oil and gas companies would pay rural counties the taxes they are owed. A year ago, these taxes totaled $250 million. Now they owe over $330 million. To the Minister, the tax bill is going up under his watch. Can he explain why he hasn't fulfilled his promise to help collect property taxes from oil and gas companies and pay municipalities what they are owed?
The Honourable the Minister of Municipal Affairs.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and we've done exactly what we said we do. We've helped municipalities out in several different ways. We made it harder for those oil and gas companies that don't behave well to transfer wells. We've made it so that they can be sued successfully by municipalities, and the problem goes on, Mr. Speaker. So as long as it does, we'll work with them. And in fact, let's be clear, a vast majority of oil and gas companies pay all their bills. They pay them on time. They pay them in full. We are dealing with a small number of mostly foreign-owned companies that don't care, and we will get to the point where we're just going to have to force them.
The Honourable Member for Sherwood Park.
Given that the Minister of Energy once told the Alberta Energy Regulator what the Minister just said, that municipalities should be made whole for all the unpaid property taxes before any assets change hands, and given that the Minister has now removed that same requirement mandating that the industry pay its bills, will the Minister provide a clear timeline to municipalities across Alberta who have lost so much revenue due to this government's failures when they will finally be paid what they are owed?
The Honourable the Minister of Municipal Affairs.
You know what, Mr. Speaker, as I said a minute ago, we will continue to work on behalf of rural municipalities to either get the companies that owe the money to pay or to find a way to put them out of business. Everybody's got to pay their taxes. I have to pay my taxes. We all have to pay our taxes, and those oil and gas companies do. They're the ones that don't. And frankly, I will keep advocating for the AER to put them out of business, because allowing any company from any industry at any time to continue without paying their taxes is unacceptable.
The Honourable Member.
Minister, you're not paying property taxes to some cities. Now, given that municipalities have lost significant revenue to this government's tax holiday on new wells, the removal of the well drilling equipment tax, and the minister's failure to guarantee payment of overdue municipal taxes, I'm looking for a clear timeline. And given that these funds would be used for essential infrastructure like roads, bridges, and services that benefit their residents, the very same oil and gas companies that use their land, how exactly does the minister plan to ensure, and when will he make sure they are paid whole once again?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the frankly, lack of knowledge of my critic is astounding. We don't pay property taxes. No government in Canada pays taxes to another government. My critic should know that. We all should know that. Seems like the only one in the room that doesn't know that is the one that on the other side that most should. So, Mr. Speaker, on that file, we make a decision every year on a grant that we pay in place of taxes. We don't know. We know what we've done this year. We don't know what we're going to do next year. But it'll be part of, as the Premier and I have discussed with municipalities, it will be part of the discussion in this next year's budget.
The Honourable Member for Camrose is next.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have great news for high school students across the province. Alberta's economy is growing rapidly, and after your graduation, there are endless opportunities to pursue good-paying careers in emerging industries such as technologies, the skilled trades, aviation, and so much more. My question is to the Minister of Education. How are you ensuring students are prepared for their life after graduation in Alberta's rapidly growing economy?
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Well, Mr. Speaker, one of the things that we're doing to make sure that young Albertans have opportunities right here at home is to make sure that our economy is strong, vibrant, and diverse, unlike when the NDP was in power and our economy was in the toilet and they drove Albertans out of the province. We are seeing people flocking back to Alberta for economic opportunity. That is a precondition to making sure that our students have success. We're also making sure that we are investing in career education opportunities, including a $12 million investment in Budget 24 alone over the next 3 years to enhance dual credit opportunities and other opportunities for students.
The Honourable Member for Camrose.
Thank you to the Minister and to the Speaker. Given that our government is committed to expanding captivating, hands-on career education courses for students across the province, and given that this will help students earn valuable skills and post-secondary credits while completing their education, and given that our government just announced more funding to support school authorities across the province in enhancing and starting up dual credit programming, can the same minister share what opportunities our government's recent investments is unlocking for students?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
I'd be happy to, Mr. Speaker. As the member noted earlier this week, we announced that we're providing an additional investment of $4.9 million into dual credit programs this school year alone. This money will go to help support 55 new programs and enhance 22 existing programs for students across approximately 58 school divisions across the entire province. Dual credit opportunities are fantastic opportunities for students. They help them pursue career options and opportunities and help set them up for success after graduation.
The Honourable Member for Camrose.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the Minister for that answer. Given that enhancing dual credit programming is just one part of our government's commitment to giving students opportunities to pursue their education pathways while in school, and given the Minister's announcement that there are 7 new collegiate schools that are welcoming students this school year, and further given these new collegiates will offer students programming in science, aviation, technology, engineering, agriculture, business, information communications, and the trades, to the same minister, how do collegiate schools fit into our government's commitment to give students a head start on life after school?
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Collegiate schools are such a key part of Alberta's amazing and successful model of school choice. These schools work they're driven primarily by our school divisions, of course, first and foremost, but they're done so in partnership with a post-secondary partner. And through those partnerships, students are able to explore exciting career opportunities and double down on career education while at the same time completing their high school diploma and earning credits for post post-secondary education. And as the member noted, there are exciting dual credit opportunities in many in-demand occupations across the province.
The honourable member for Calgary Elbow has risen.
Mr. Speaker, the answer to the affordability crisis is another job, according to my friends on the other side of the aisle. Indeed, life would be easier for all Albertans if we made more money. Alas, Alberta has the second highest unemployment rate in Canada. We're just ahead of Newfoundland. 7.5% of people looking for work in Alberta can't find it. Why is this government choosing to eviscerate health education as its top priority instead of focusing on job growth?
The Honourable the Minister of Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, job opportunities, high wages, low taxes, competitive cost of living, quality of life has motivated record numbers of Canadians to relocate to Alberta. This growth and recent high interest rates has impacted Alberta's unemployment rate as new Albertans take time to settle into their jobs. But Alberta is seeing consistent and strong job growth. In August alone, we added 12,800 jobs to our workforce, representing 58% of all new jobs created in Canada. Mr. Speaker, people are coming here for opportunity and prosperity.
The honourable member for Calgary Elbow.
I'm so glad the minister thinks everything's going great. Given Albertans know that in addition to high unemployment, we have the weakest wage growth in the country since 2019. Ordinary Albertans aren't feeling this rosy picture. Given that we're doing worse than Saskatchewan, and given that since the UCP was elected in 2019, Alberta is the only province in Canada where wages haven't kept up with inflation. Why is the UCP government okay with low wage growth, high inflation, and falling real wages?
The Honourable the Minister of Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, Alberta is leading the country in economic growth, job creation, productivity, weekly earnings, and more. While Alberta's unemployment rate is being impacted by record population growth, and our government is taking action. And we're investing into education, post-secondary, and employment and training programs to ensure that workers are well positioned to succeed in our growing economy. Mr. Speaker, there are more than 73,000 people working in Alberta today versus 12 months ago. So we remain confident in Alberta's economic future.
The honourable member.
Given that it takes a special kind of government to be so comprehensively avoid accountability for making Albertans' lives worse, given that instead of fueling economic growth by lowering costs and allowing businesses to invest, this Premier became the first in Alberta's history to ban energy investment by the private sector. Given that Microsoft bought clean energy in Pennsylvania, not here, given energy investment in Texas has taken off while here we banned it, why is this government destroying our competitiveness, thereby increasing unemployment and hammering Albertans' wages?
The same minister.
Mr. Speaker, the NDP increased taxes, they increased regulatory burden, and they were proudly anti-energy and anti-business. It's no surprise to anyone except for the NDP that billions of dollars of investment and tens of thousands of jobs, for that matter, left the province. For 13 consecutive quarters, Albertans fled in droves under their leadership. We reduced taxes. We reduced regulatory burden. We're pro-energy. We're pro-business, Mr. Speaker. We restored the Alberta advantage when they tried to trash it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Edmonton Ellerslie.
Alberta's strength is its diversity because we welcome people from all over the world and celebrate cultures, religions, and beliefs. However, Alberta's statutory holidays do not reflect our rich cultural diversity, and so many Albertans have to go to school or work on their holiest, most culturally significant days. Last year, the Premier told the Muslim community she would work to celebrate Eid the same way others celebrate Christmas, and she said last April she'd bring in legislation to make this change. When can the Muslim community and other diverse communities expect the Premier to follow through with her promise?
The Honourable the Minister of Immigration Multiculturalism.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you very much for the member for the question. As the member opposite knows that yes, it is in my mandate letter to look into the possibilities of celebrating faith-based holidays, cultural-based holidays in this province, and we are looking at various options and around the various jurisdictions to make sure that we're able to do so.
The honourable member for Edmonton Ellerslie.
Given that too many Albertans know the frustration of having to miss out on Eid celebrations, the Lunar New Year, Rosh Hashanah, or Diwali, and given that other important celebrations are missed because families have to go to work or school on days that go beyond Christmas and Easter, why hasn't this government followed through on their commitment of giving people time off from work and school, in particular the Muslim community the Premier wrote to in her open letter? Is this just another instance of the Premier making promises to secure her leadership vote that she never intends to keep?
The Honourable the Minister of Immigration and Multiculturalism.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member again for the question. As I said before, we are looking at not only the faith-based holidays as well as other issues around newcomers communities here to make sure that they are fully they're happy and incorporated in our system here, and we are doing our best to make sure that they are able to take time off from work, from schools to celebrate their holidays and cultural events.
The honourable member.
Given that these days help Canadians participate in the religious and cultural traditions of their families, and given that recognizing these days would send an important signal that not only does the government acknowledge diversity, but actually supports it, what is the UCP's plan to action this commitment of the Premier, specifically to the Muslim community, to bring in legislation for Muslims to receive statutory holidays for Eid this coming spring?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration and Multiculturalism.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I mentioned before, that our government is looking at all options for all faith-based, including Muslims, Muslim holidays, and once we have reviewed the process that we need to review to make sure that that we are able to do in a way that it's sustainable and workable with our businesses in this province and our other cultural communities, we will be able to do that. But let me tell you how much we have done for newcomers. We have done a lot of things for newcomers, including heritage recognitions, personal recognitions, and
the honourable member for Cypress, Medicine Act.
Mr. Speaker, for generations, Alberta's energy sector has fueled economic growth, prosperity, and hope. The wealth generated by oil sands developments support jobs in every region of our province and provide revenue for important services and infrastructure. Despite the critical role energy plays on our economy, the Trudeau Liberals are proposing a 40% emissions cap on oil and natural gas production. To the Minister of Energy and Minerals, how would the federal government's emissions cap impact Alberta's economy?
Good question.
The Honourable the Minister of Energy and Minerals.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. There's no doubt that the emission cap proposed by the Alberta NDP's leader in Ottawa, the Nenshi Justin Cap, will devastate our economy, Mr. Speaker. It will devastate the lives of Albertans. It's been estimated that up to 150,000 Canadians will be out of work as a result of this. As well, Mr. Speaker, it will make the lives of Canadians and especially Albertans more expensive than ever. This will have the biggest impact on Albertans, Mr. Speaker, and we believe that it will mean lost jobs, hurt families, shuttered businesses, and lost money. It needs to stop. We need to get rid of the cap, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Cypress Medicine Hat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the Minister for this vital information. Given that energy is the largest contributing sector of Alberta's economy, and given that Ottawa is proposing an emissions cap amid a period of growth and job creation in our energy sector, and given that energy security has never been of greater importance to Canadians, to the same minister, how is Alberta's government standing up for energy workers and spreading our message nationwide of axing the cap?
Good. The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Mr. Speaker, it is true. Less schools will be built, less hospitals will be built right across Canada. We're asking all Albertans, all Canadians, to have their say with MPs to scrap the cap, Mr. Speaker. We need to make sure we stop this as soon as possible. We've launched a campaign to inform Canadians of the danger of this latest bit of misguided direction from the Liberals in Ottawa. Both Justin Trudeau and Stephen Guilbeault are misguided, Mr. Speaker. We're encouraging all Canadians to help us scrap the cap. www.scrapthecap.com. Join today. This is an effort worth Moving on, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the Minister. Given that Albertans understand the importance of maintaining healthy ecological systems for future generations, and given that innovations are currently underway in our energy sector that contribute to a cleaner environment, and given an emissions cap would only replace low-carbon Canadian production with higher polluting, less responsible oil from other countries, can the same minister share how Alberta's energy sector is already contributing to emissions reduction? Thank you.
Good question. The honourable minister.
Mr. Speaker, it doesn't make any sense. The Liberals' approach is just not working. Alberta is positioned to be a global solution to emissions reduction. We need them to work with us, not against us. We're already leading the way in the world on carbon capture technologies. We are set up to be world leaders in supplying low-emission and high-demand fuels and minerals like hydrogen, ammonia, and lithium. You might have heard of oil and gas as well, Mr. Speaker. We are here. We can service the world with natural gas, low emissions, less pollution, Mr. Speaker. Alberta energy is better. Here, here, here.
The honourable member for Calgary Northeast has a question.
Residents in Calgary Northeast wait in very long queues to get access to basic services like driver licenses, car registrations, health cards, and much more. When the majority of the residents have to go to work to drop off their kids or pick up their kids from school, get the senior parents to doctor appointments, they wait in endless queues to get services they rely on. And these queues are getting longer. What is the minister's plan to build more registry services so Albertans can get these services in timely manner?
The Honourable Minister of Service Alberta and Red Tape Reduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to say that our government will continue to do market analysis where demand warrants. But what I would suggest to that member and his constituents is driver's licenses, license plates, they can all be renewed online. It's just one more example of how we've cut red tape in this province to make life better for Albertans.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Northeast.
Given that the Northeast is the fastest growing neighbourhood in entire Calgary and most Albertans need services like getting their car plates changed or updating the health card for Alberta Health Services, which is also in a mess thanks to this UCP government, and given that it's not just the long wait times for AHS but also longer in registry services in communities, why did not the minister plan an expansion of registry services ahead of time so things did not have to get to this point?
The Honourable Minister of Service Alberta.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is asking the wrong question. The question he should be asking is when is someone from that side of the House going to resign so the leader of the NDP can run for election? Are they waiting for us to do it, Mr. Speaker? Because we're not going to step aside for them. Absolutely not. And he's...
Order. The Honourable the Minister of Service Alberta has 10 seconds remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The leader of the NDP is humiliated as they refuse to step aside for him. When our leader won the race, we had somebody that stepped aside the next day. When's it going to be?
Order. The Honourable Member. Yeah, the Honourable Member for Calgary Northeast.
Given that this UCP government has continuously ignored Northeast Calgary, whether that be failing to build new schools, new hospitals, recreation centres, the green LRT, and hail damage, and much more, given that the Calgary Northeast residents are now struggling to get more basic services that the government offers, when will the UCP stop ignoring Northeast Calgary, and will the minister commit today to building more registry services in Northeast Calgary? The question is simple. The minister don't have to get angry on this.
Service Alberta. Mr. Speaker, I will commit to campaigning in Calgary Northeast if that member agrees to resign for the leader of the NDP, because he's forced to watch Alberta Ledge TV from his home as his caucus drinks Perrier like it's happy hour. Mr. Speaker, Albertans want to know who's going to resign.
Order. The Honourable Member for Grand Prairie Wapiti has a question to...
Mr. Speaker, Albertans, including those in my constituency of Grand Prairie Wapiti, are increasingly concerned about the carbon tax and its impact on utility costs during Alberta's long winters. It's evident that the Trudeau Liberals, along their NDP allies, are prioritizing an ideological agenda over making life more affordable for Canadians. To the Minister of Affordability and Utilities, how has the federal carbon tax affected the cost of living and what are the economic consequences for Albertans?
The Honourable the Minister of Affordability and Utilities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the member for that great question. The federal carbon tax is driving up the cost of everything, including food, fuel, and home heating. The carbon tax exacerbates the high cost of living that Albertans and Canadians are already experiencing, a situation fueled by poor NDP Liberal economic policies and out-of-control spending from the federal government. If the Alberta NDP truly cared about affordability and Albertans, they would join us and their own counterparts in British Columbia and Saskatchewan and call on Ottawa to axe the tax.
The Honourable Member for Grand Prairie Wapiti.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the Minister for that answer. Given that the carbon tax costs Albertans and Canadians hundreds of dollars each year, and these costs will continue to rise, and further given that just last April Canadians faced a staggering 23% increase in the federal carbon tax, to the Minister of Affordability and Utilities, could you please elaborate on how our government is working to lower the cost of living for all Albertans?
The Honourable Minister of Affordability and Utilities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While the NDP Liberals in Ottawa are making everything more expensive and driving up the costs of inflation with their carbon tax, our government is focused on lowering the cost of everyday essentials. We are breaking down economic barriers and helping Albertans to earn more to keep pace with the cost of living. This includes maintaining the lowest overall taxes in the country, creating the seniors discount, removing NDP fees for recovery services, and supporting our food banks. Just to name a few of the many things that we are doing that the NDP failed to do in their time in office.
The Honourable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the Minister. Given that this disastrous tax does nothing but hurt Albertans and frankly all Canadians, and further given that the Alberta NDP leader still refuses to clarify his stance on the carbon tax, could the same Minister please elaborate on our government's stance on the carbon tax and our plan to lower utility costs for all Albertans?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'll note to my colleague that while the NDP leader continues to be evasive on carbon tax, make no mistake, the Alberta NDP support Trudeau's carbon tax. On this side of the House, we'll put Albertans first, not Ottawa like the members opposite. Our UCP government demands that the NDP Liberals axe the tax, and we're taking Ottawa to court on their unconstitutional, unlawful heating oil exemption. Despite the carbon tax, Alberta's electricity inflation rates is down 36% year over year thanks to our government's policy, and our work has only just begun to lower Albertans' utility bills.
The Honourable Member for Calgary, Buller-McCall, has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This past August 5th, Calgary area was hit by a massive hailstorm, which according to Insurance Bureau of Canada, has resulted in $2.8 billion in insured losses. The hailstorm is the second costliest disaster in Canada's history, following the 2016 Fort McMurray wildfire. Yet we didn't see anyone from the UCP government visit or listen to the concerns of those impacted by this disaster. Can anyone from the government side get up and tell us one meaningful step that they have taken to help those affected by this hailstorm? Just one step.
The Honourable the Minister of Finance, the President of Treasury Board has risen.
Mr. Speaker, the claim the member just made about $2.8 billion is correct, and I can share with everyone about a billion of that was on Ottawa alone. That hailstorm hitting the Calgary airport, I don't know if there's many more dangerous or expensive places a hailstorm could hit, maybe an airport in Dubai. But that's added just more pressure into the system. We're currently seeing 17 to 19% pressure in the insurance system, and that's why we're going to need to act swiftly with short-term and long-term reform.
The Honourable Member for Calgary, Buller-McCall.
Given that the people affected by the hailstorm are asking for fairly basic information and transparency, it won't cost government much. So my question is, can the government share with Albertans how many claims have been registered, how many have been processed, how many are pending, and when can people expect to see all their claims processed and dealt with?
The Honourable the Minister of Finance, President of Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, the Alberta government doesn't regulate property insurance, but we have worked closely with the different insurance companies and firms. Also with the fire in Jasper, we've worked closely to make sure that they're working as swiftly and efficiently as possible to deal with the claims that they're seeing on the ground. We'll continue to do that work. but we also have to be very careful that the government of Alberta stays in their lane when it comes to insurable and uninsurable losses. That's very important for now and into the future.
Given that prior to this hailstorm, the 2020 hailstorm caused over $1.2 billion in damages, mostly around Northeast Calgary, and given that government refused to help with it, then in any meaningful way, is it the government policy to ignore Northeast Calgary and do nothing to help them? Has the government learned anything from these disasters? Are there any plans to change building codes to mandate more hail-resistant building materials in hail-prone areas?
The Honourable Minister of Municipal Affairs has risen.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is suggesting we make housing more affordable by taking away more affordable siding choices on the homes. And I appreciate it's a kind of a natural thing that something that's less expensive doesn't stand up always as well as something more expensive. I'm just curious if that's the NDP's position, is to make housing less expensive for people that can least afford it, because I think that's what I just heard.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Klein is next.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week I met with the Alberta Student Executive Council and international students, and they shone a light on unique challenges faced by these students in light of federal immigration changes. So this includes limits to hours of work, predatory recruitment practices, no flexibility in program changes, and all of this with the background of an affordability crisis that is affecting all Albertans. So we know we need to keep recruiting skilled folks in economic target areas to build a robust economy that serves all of Alberta. What is this government doing to ensure that international students are well supported?
The Honourable Minister of Advanced Education.
Thank you for that very important question. We know that government policies at the federal level have really impacted international students, and we know that international students are important as well. But the fact of the matter is that that resides with the federal government. They make the policies related to international students. And I do want to take a moment just to say that our post-secondary institutions have done a great job in terms of providing quality education to these students.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Klein.
So given that international students are impacted by the recent spike in anti-immigrant sentiment, with no help from the Premier signaling that immigrants are actually the problem, and given that what we really need is a government that takes action and invests in healthcare, housing, student services, and education, and given that as late as August, this Premier had Alberta calling and has now unceremoniously hung up. Can she let us know how she will now assist and advocate for international students, the international students we called?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister of Advanced Education.
Let me be clear, Mr. Speaker. International students are not to blame for this situation. The blame falls exclusively on the Trudeau government and their irresponsible open border policies. That is the reality of the situation. But having said that, I've met with all of the post-secondary institutions here in this province and have made a special request to make sure that international students are cared for by their students' associations and by administrations. That is what we can do here in terms of the government of Alberta, but the responsibility does reside with the federal government.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Klein.
So given that the government MO of throwing vulnerable populations under the bus isn't just cruel, it actually won't help us meet our economic goals, and given that ensuring the success of all students in Alberta, regardless of their nationality, helps to move our province forward and makes us more competitive, and given that on this side of the House we support all newcomers, whether they're students, workers, future citizens, because they are part of our communities, will this government stop picking fights, look at other orders of government, cooperate, stop fomenting fear and division, and commit to respecting the students we need to build the province?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, all newcomers are valued here in this province and in this country. International students are valued as well. And Alberta is a good actor. We haven't seen the same problems that other jurisdictions have. And our post-secondary institutions have been incredibly responsible in making sure that international students receive a quality education and that they do receive supports when they are required. So I'm very proud to again advocate for our post-secondary institutions and the work that they have done with international students students. And again, any issues that are related to them are really within the purview of the federal government. I can't emphasize that enough.
The honourable member for West Yellowhead.
Mr. Speaker, Albertans deserve the assurance that the food they serve to their families is safe and that their government is taking action to protect it. Food safety is essential to our health, our economy, and is something that cannot be taken for granted. Safe food is not only essential to public health, but also to Alberta's reputation as a world-class leader in livestock production. To the Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation, what is Alberta's government doing to ensure the meat served on tables across our province is safe for our families to eat?
The Honourable the Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member from West Yellowhead for such a great question. I mean, making sure Albertans have access to safe, high-quality food is a top priority for this government. Mr. Speaker, I'm so proud that our government has tabled Bill 28, the Meat Inspection Amendment Act. This bill proposes to raise maximum fines to $100,000 for offenders who break the law by participating in illegal slaughter. Mr. Speaker, these illegal actions pose a serious risk to food safety and animal health.
The honourable member for West Yellowhead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the Minister for that update. Given that over the last 2 years, Alberta has seen an increase in the illegal slaughter and sale of uninspected meat. And given that trend threatens to undermine consumer safety and the reputation of producers. And given the critical role Alberta livestock producers and meat processors play in our economy, to the Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation, how will the proposed increases in fines deter illegal activity and reassure Albertans that our food system remains trustworthy? What is our government doing to strengthen the enforcement of these regulations?
The Honourable the Minister of Agriculture.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government is proposing an increase in maximum fines from $10,000 to $100,000 for each offence. This increase is a significant deterrent. Mr. Speaker, we're sending a clear message that illegal actions that create dangerous and unhealthy conditions for Albertans will not be tolerated. Bill 28 is also extending the time from 1 year to 2 years to allow inspectors to address complex cases and bring those offenders to justice. Mr. Speaker, I strongly encourage all Albertans to buy their meat from licensed operators and retailers. That list can be found on alberta.ca.
The honourable member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that Alberta's livestock producers are vital contributors to our economy, creating jobs in every region of the province while feeding the world, given the high value Alberta's government places on ensuring their voices and concerns are heard, and given the need to maintain healthy supply chains at every step from field to fork, can the Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation share the response from agriculture leaders to these proposed increased penalties?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Alberta has the best food safety and highest quality protein in the world, and that reputation has been built on the hard-working producers, ranchers, and businesses. Mr. Speaker, the changes would strengthen food safety without increasing operating costs for the industry. Leaders in the industry have expressed their support for government's Bill 28 and its intent to ensure we keep Alberta's food supply chain strong and livestock industry safe for future generations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, that concludes the time allotted for oral question period. In 30 seconds or less, we will continue with the remainder of the daily routine. Order. The honourable member for Sherwood Park has a statement to make.
The air is growing crisp. Morning frosts are here, and hopefully all the leaves are raked up in the hamlet of Sherwood Park as we're preparing for Halloween night. Halloween in Sherwood Park and Strathcona County gets community together for all types of activities, like the Haunted Trail tours at Strathcona Wilderness Center, trick-or-treating along Candy Cane Map in Sherwood Heights, the Haunted Forest in Gilmore Park, a potluck at Strathcona Primary Care Network, mystery at the museum, market at Pioneer House, and pumpkin carving at Colchester Hall, along with all the family and neighborhood traditions across Sherwood Park. This Saturday, folks will be able to take their used jack-o'-lanterns to Fire Station 6 and toss those pumpkins over a off a four-story hall to raise money for Philip Boots, an annual fundraiser by Canada's firefighters to support Muscular Dystrophy Canada. Most events in Sherwood Park include charitable events like collection for the Strathcona Food Bank, the Christmas Bureau, Youth Empowerment and Support Services, so many other amazing organizations that are connected with Sherwood Park. Sherwood Park always comes together to support those in need. Volunteers are essential to Halloween activities, and we owe a big thank you to all the volunteers that bring our community together for festivities and bring life, foster friendship and community amongst our neighbors. As we all know, connections build community, and research shows that a strong sense of community combats misinformation, paranoia, and isolation as important today as ever. It is because of a strong sense of community and that we know that the Sasquatches in Sherwood Park are just kids dressed up in costumes, and there will be no spooky chemtrails sprayed on the residents of Sherwood Park tonight. Halloween is more than just a day of fun. It enhances our sense of togetherness, creates unique opportunities for connections. The simple act of trick-or-treating fosters interactions among neighbors, much like door knocking by MLAs love to do.
The Honourable the Governor, go ahead. Go ahead.
Committees.
The Chief Government Whip.
In accordance with Section 19.5 of the Auditor General Act, Chair and as Chair of the Committee on Standing Legislative Offices, pleased to table the Office of the Auditor General results for the reports at the end of March 31st, 2024. Electronic copies will be provided to all the members.
Any petitions? Notices of motions.
The Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I do that, may I also rise and advise the Assembly that pursuant to Standing Order 7.8, daily routine may continue past 3 p.m.
Please proceed.
On to the motion. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 34.3, I wish to advise the Assembly that motion for return 19, which the Assembly had previously been advised was to be accepted on Monday, May 27th, will now be dealt with on the next available Monday.
Introduction of bills.
The Honourable, the Minister of Health, I have.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm honoured to rise and request leave to introduce Bill 26, the Health Statutes Amendment Act 2024. This bill would continue work to refocus the healthcare system, provide clarity on issues that matter to Albertans, and preserve choice for minors identifying as transgender or gender diverse. It includes amendments to the Provincial Health Agencies Act, the Public Health Act, the Health Information Act, and Health Professions Act. These amendments would enable us to implement policies and bring clarity to existing legislation. Further, they reflect our commitment to build a healthcare system that responds to the changing needs of Albertans. With that, Mr. Speaker, I hereby move first reading of the Health Statutes Amendment Act.
Honourable members, the Honourable the Minister of Health has moved first reading of Bill 26, the Health Statutes Amendment Act 2024, number 2. All those in favour of the motion for first reading, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. No. In my opinion, the noes have it. That motion is defeated and a division has been called. Call in the members. Honourable members, a division has been called on Bill 26, the Health Statutes Amendment Act 2024, number 2. All those in favour of the motion, please rise.
Honourable Ms. Smith, Honourable Mr. Guthrie, Honourable Mr. Nicolaides, Honourable Mr. Glubish, Honourable Minister LaGrange, Honourable Mr. Horner, Honourable Mr. Scow, Honourable Mr. Ellis, Honourable Mr. Amory, Honourable Mr. Newdorf, Honourable Mr. Lowen, Honourable Mr. Wilson, Honourable Mr. Jean, Honourable Mr. Dreeshen, Honourable Mr. Nixon, Mr. Long, Mr. Rosewell, Honourable Mr. Turton, Honourable Mr. Yassine, Honourable Mr. McIver, Honourable Ms. Furr, Honourable Ms. Sani, Mr. Getson, Honourable Mr. Sigurdsson, Honourable Mr. Nally, Honourable Mr. Hunter, Mr. Yao, Mr. Wright, Mr. Van Dyken, Ms. Pitt, Mrs. Johnson, Mr. Sear, Mr. Lunty, Mr. Wiebe, Mr. Boychenko, Mr. McDougall, Mrs. Petrovic, Mr. Stefan, Mr. Dick, Honourable Ms. Armstrong-Hominick, Ms. de Jong, Mr. Sinclair, Mr. Bouchard, Mr. Singh, Ms. Lovely.
All those opposed, please rise.
Honourable Ms. Gray, Mr. Haji, Member Archon Paul, Honourable Mr. Sabir, Honourable Member Hoffman, Mr. Ip, Ms. Callahoof Stonehouse, Honourable Mr. Egan, Ms. Pancholi, Mr. Ellingson, Member El Maligi, Mr. Shepherd, Ms. Sweet, Ms. Wright, Member Brar, Member Aramenko, Ms. Chapman, Member Kayande, Member Hoyle, Mr. Kozowski, Member Batten, Member Tejada, Member Irwin, Ms. Renault, Member Beaupurai, Honourable Mr. Schmidt, Honourable Mr. Ceci, Honourable Ms. Notley, Honourable Ms. Sigurdsson, Mr. Diol, Member Loyola, Mr. Dack, Ms. Goring, Dr. Metz.
Mr. Speaker, total for the motion 45, total against 34.
Motion is carried and so ordered.
Bill 26, Health Statutes Amendment Act 2024, number 2 is now read a first time.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request leave to introduce a bill, being Bill 27, the Education Amendment Act 2024. The bill will provide clarity, consistency, and transparency to education policies in schools across Alberta. Parents across the province want to be more involved and have a larger say in their child's education, and we are happy to strengthen their involvement through these proposed amendments. Again, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to move first reading of Bill 27.
Honourable members, the Honourable Minister of Education has moved first reading of Bill 27, Education Amendment Act 2024. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. No. In my opinion, the ayes have it. That motion is carried and so ordered.
Bill 27, Education Amendment Act 2024 is now read a first time.
The Honourable the Minister of Tourism and Sport.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request leave to introduce Bill 29, the Fairness and Safety in Sport Act. This legislation is a major step in ensuring fairness, safety, and inclusivity in sport for Albertans. Mr. Speaker, no athlete should have an unfair advantage, and no athlete should have to put themselves at risk or harm in order to participate in the sports they love. That's why our government is introducing legislation to ensure biological female athletes are able to compete in biological female-only divisions, and are working with our partners to ensure that transgender athletes have meaningful opportunities to participate in the sports they love of their choice. If passed, Bill 29 will ensure a balanced, fair, and safe, inclusive direction for amateur competitive sport development in Alberta for years to come. With that, Mr. Speaker, I hereby move first reading of Bill 29, the Fairness and Safety in Sport Act 2024.
Honourable members, the Honourable the Minister of Tourism and Sport, the Government House Leader, has moved first reading of Bill 29, Fairness and Safety in Sport Act. All those in favour of the motion for first reading, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. No. In my opinion, the ayes have it. That motion is carried and so ordered.
Bill 29, Fairness and Safety in Sport Act is now read a first time. Tabling, returns, and reports.
Are there tablings? Okay, hang on. If you're not tabling, give me 2 minutes to do tablings. The Honourable Member for Calgary Foothills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am honoured and pleased today to stand in support of our trans community and their allies and table 5 requisite copies of a letter submitted from a constituent to the Premier begging the Premier to change the plans for legislation that will remove access to vital health care for trans and gender diverse communities.
Further tabling, the Honourable Member for Calgary-Beddington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to table the requisite copies of a Resource Action Canada for Sexual Health and Rights, just another resource for folks to review on comprehensive sexual health education and how it works to prevent gender-based violence.
Honourable Member for Cypress Medicine Hat has a tabling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to submit the 5 requisite copies of 3 articles, one showcasing the cost of $22 billion collected between 2019 and 2020 and 2022 and 2023 from small businesses through the carbon tax, and only 0.17% was returned to small businesses in rebates. The second showcases the total cost of $6,700 per year by 2030 for the carbon tax. And the third one is the article showcasing legal firearms owners are rarely involved in gun
The Honourable Member for Edmonton South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to table 5 copies of an article of the devastating impact that this UCP government has had on the renewable energy sector, driving billions of investment and construction projects out of our province.
Are there others? The Honourable Member for Calgary Elbow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have the 5 requisite copies of a newspaper article to remember sapper Stephen Henry Marshall. Yesterday was the 15th anniversary of his death in combat, and he is remembered and missed by his friends and family, including some in Calgary Elbow. Our freedom isn't free.
For Edmonton, Highlands, Norwood, followed by Decor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to table the requisite number of copies of an email from a parent, one of literally thousands of emails we are receiving from folks all across Alberta, urging the UCP to reconsider the egregious anti-trans bills that they just introduced. Please read those emails.
Member for Edmonton Decor.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to table 5 copies of CBC article that came out this week. The article shows a new data that reveals Calgarian standing to the food bank doubled since the UCB2 came to power.
Member for Calgary Varsity. Member for Sherwood Park, please take a seat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to table 5 copies of my op-ed from the Calgary Herald of April 2024 and the follow-up communications from a sampling of many paramedics who shared their experiences with me. All pertain to the system challenges that hurt the mental health of Alberta paramedics.
For others, the member for Edmonton McClung.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today with 2 tablings. Number 1, an article from today's Calgary Herald by Audrey Pridham, which states in its title that housing costs are the #1 concern for business owners in a study reciting that the province is failing to address housing costs and is causing inflation to go up. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to draw attention with this second tabling to the important role that all our electoral officers, independent officers of the legislature, all combined play in our democracy, in that they act as a check on unbridled government power, and I have 5 copies.
Are there others? Seeing none, the clerk.
Tablings to the clerk, deferred divisions.
Honourable members, that brings us to points of order. And at 2:00, the Honourable the Government House Leader rose on a point of order.
Withdraw.
I consider that matter dealt with and concluded. At 2:02, the official opposition House Leader rose on a point of order.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rose under 23 HI&J, specifically uses abusive or insulting language of a nature likely to create disorder. At that time, the member from Edmonton Rutherford was asking a question that included the line, "This whole thing is embarrassing," speaking about the concerns around hockey tickets and the lack of transparency from this government. At that time, the Minister for Seniors, Community and Social Services yelled very loudly, "You're right, you are embarrassing." Mr. Speaker, House of Commons, Procedure and Practice, page 623, personal attacks, insults, and obscenities are not in order as well. Page 610, personal attacks and heated exchanges are more likely or less likely when comments are directed to the chair rather than through another member. I'm particularly saying you are embarrassing is just an outright insult. Absolutely untrue when the member was simply seeking transparency on behalf of Albertans. I would ask that that minister apologize, withdraw, and discontinuing from personal attacks of my members.
The Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If in fact the member said you are embarrassing, that would in fact be a point of order. I did speak to the member. My understanding was he said the question is embarrassing. I don't have record of it. I didn't hear it myself. If I am corrected and he in fact said you are embarrassing, that would of course be a point of order. I'll leave the rest in your hands.
You have the benefit of the blues, and I am prepared to rule. The Honourable Member for Edmonton Rutherford said, Mr. Speaker, this whole thing's embarrassing. The Honourable Minister of Children and Social Services, not only do I have the benefit of the blues, but I could hear from here where he said, you're right, you are embarrassing. He proceeded to say, very embarrassing. This is a point of order. It should be apologized for and withdrawn.
Mr. Speaker, you are right. That is a point of order. Withdraw and apologize.
I consider this matter dealt with and concluded. Orders of the day, orders du jour.
Under Government Motion 49, Honourable Mr. Scott.
The Honourable, the Government House Leader.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to move Government Motion 49, which reads as follows. Be it resolved that the Legislative Assembly concur in the report of the Select Special Ethics Commissioner and Chief Electoral Officer Search Committee, Sessional Paper SP 534/2023-24, and recommend to the Lieutenant Governor in Council that Gordon McClure be appointed as Chief Electoral Officer for the Province of Alberta effective November 18th, 2024. Yesterday, on October 30th, 2024, after nearly a year search process, the committee recommended to the Assembly that Mr. McClure be appointed to the position of the Chief Electoral Officer. As you are aware, Alberta's Chief Electoral Officer serves as an independent officer of the legislature and provides leadership and direction to Elections Alberta to ensure all provincial enumerations, elections, by-elections, and plebiscites are conducted in accordance with the Elections Act and the Elections Finances and Contributions Disclosure Act and the Senatorial Selection Act. The search process for this position was thorough. It was led by a bipartisan committee with members supported by LAO staff and the Public Services Nonpartisan Executive Search Team. I want to take this opportunity to thank all members of the search committee for undertaking this important work and the dedicated staff who supported them throughout this important process over the last year. Mr. Speaker, the committee received applications from candidates around Canada and other jurisdictions, around Alberta rather, and other jurisdictions in Canada. Executive Search completed screening reports on top of applicants, and after that, the committee reviewed all resumes and screening reports to determine a short list for preliminary interviews. Then, Executive Search conducted those preliminary interviews and reported back to the committee. Finally, the committee conducted the interviews with selected candidates and selected Mr. McClure as a successful candidate. As you see, Madam Speaker, members of the committee undertook a thorough process to find the right candidate for the Chief Electoral Officer position. Madam Speaker, I had the opportunity to review the position profile of the Chief Electoral Officer and Mr. McClure's bio, and I'm confident in his ability to carry out the duties of Alberta's Chief Electoral Officer. For instance, the person appointed to this position should have a strong record of achievement at the executive level in public or private sector administration, overseeing significant financial, fiscal, and human resource operations. And Mr. McClure brings a wealth of experience to this role as a long-serving public servant for over 26 years. Most recently, Mr. McClure served as the chair for the Public Lands Appeal Board and Appeals Coordinator for over 10 years. And he has also served as an Assistant Deputy Minister of Revenue and Financial Operations in the Yukon, and was before that the Director of Business Services and Project Management in the Department of Municipal Affairs with the Government of Alberta. This person should have understanding of financial management practices and procedures to include financial statements, budgets, and audit techniques. And not only was Gordon McClure ADM of Revenue and Financial Operations in the Yukon, but he also holds a Master of Public Administration from the University of Victoria. Candidates were also required to have proven expertise in the interpretation and application of legislation, regulations, and policies. Working knowledge of the parliamentary system, government functions and process, and the public sector, and experience in decision-making at a senior level related to sensitive and complex issues. Mr. McClure has extensive knowledge of legislative and policy process working in different governments. He also has senior level decision-making experience, managing budgets, and with project management. And he has completed a program in tribunal justice from the Foundation of Administrative Justice and is accredited as a qualified arbitrator. Madam Speaker, it is the standard practice that after the Select Special Committee reports on the search of the Chief Electoral Officer to the Legislative Assembly and recommends the appointment of the officer, Lieutenant Governor and Council appoints the Chief Electoral Officer on the recommendation of the Assembly. Madam Speaker, I am confident that Mr. McClure will fulfill his duties as Alberta's Chief Electoral Officer, and I am looking forward to the members of this Assembly support the committee's recommendation. Thank you.
Others that wish to join in on the debate, the Honourable Member for Calgary-Buller-McCall.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to speak to Government Motion 49, and I will share my concerns, my caucus concerns with the process that have led to the selection of Ethics Commissioner and now Chief Electoral Officer. I was a member of this committee from day one. In December of 2023, that committee was put together to look for a new Ethics Commissioner and Chief Electoral Officer. In the first round, we interviewed individuals who applied for these two positions, and after the completion of those interviews, in a very highly unusual move, the UCP changed the membership of the committee, and those members who were not even part of those interviews, they decided that they will offer the Ethics Commissioner position to a person who interviewed and not offer the Chief Electoral Officer position to anyone. That was fundamentally unfair. And the reason it was unfair, that the members who interviewed, it was their right to make that decision. Whether they chose a person out of that first round interviews and not part of those interviews, that was wrong. And if they declined candidates in the first round without hearing them, that was also wrong. So that was the flaw in this process. And might I suggest that their decisions were not based on merit, their decisions were based on political considerations. And as a result of this, in the second round, we were not able to attract as many candidates, as many high-quality candidates, as we did in the first round of interviews. And also, I think it's important to restate that the person they chose as Ethics Commissioner has well-documented history of partisanship. He had worked in this government. He had put forward his name as UCP candidate. He had history of donations, and that was all public record. And in the first round, when they chose one person with those well-documented partisan ties and ignored everybody else, That created uncertainty, and resulted in reduced confidence in the fairness of the process. And we cannot afford that because both these offices are important. All independent offices of the legislature are important, but these two particular offices, whether it's Ethics Commissioner or CEO's office, I would suggest that they're even more important given what has transpired in the last little while, whether there are discussions about hockey tickets, whether there are discussions about personal gifts and benefits. We needed to have somebody who Albertans can have full trust and confidence. And similarly, the CEO position, that office is responsible for administering our elections. Our democracy depends on that office. So it's not so much that who they have chosen through this process. Our principal concern is about the process that led to the selection of these candidates. That it was politicized, memberships were changed midway through, people who were not even part of interviews, they were able to make decisions, offer some people position, reject others without even looking at their resumes, and that is unacceptable. Ultimately, our caucus will work with the candidate that Assembly chooses and wish them best, but we, however, do wish that UCP has followed an appropriate and a fair process instead of undermining public trust and confidence in government hiring processes. Albertans deserve far better than that, and not only that they should have full trust in the person that is chosen, they should also have trust and confidence in the process. And what we have seen from this government is that they will prioritize their political interests over fairness and over fair processes. And that's the reason that we provided a minority report, essentially to share our concern with the process that led to the selection of these two positions. So with that, I will take my seat. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there others that wish to join in on the debate on Government Motion 49? The Honourable Member for Edmonton, Beverly Clairview.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm pleased to be able to rise in this House and in many, many ways echo the concerns of my colleague who just spoke. And the primary concerns are, of course, around the issue of process. Process in terms of the work of the committee, and I do think process in terms of some of the gaps that I see we're missing in terms of our work over the last year. To begin with, I was very, very privileged and very honored to be asked to sit on this committee because of the importance of both of the positions that we were discussing over the course of the year. And it really is quite something to be able to lend one's voice to these sorts of appointments, these sorts of decisions, because both these positions of Ethics Commissioner as well as Chief Electoral Officer are positions, as they are independent officers of this legislature. They underpin what it is we do in this House every day. It's not only about our collective positions as MLAs and the work that we do, but they also speak very much to what it is that we value in terms of democracy itself. That's why it's a privilege to sit on a committee like this. Both of these appointments, both of these positions are essential not only to the running of this province, but also to the integrity with which we do this job. Which means, and that extends to the trust that Albertans not only place in us, but also place in our offices. And as we all know, When trust begins to erode, it's incredibly hard to get that trust back. And quite frankly, Madam Speaker, that's what I fear has happened over the course of the last year and over the course of the deliberations of the committee. And while I have indeed been privileged to sit with my colleagues on both sides of the House and deliberate on behalf of not only my constituents but all Albertans, I am faced with the fact that both of these positions are really to make sure that we hold ourselves and government itself to a high ethical standard, so that all Albertans know that these positions themselves can equally be held in high esteem. And that trust has been eroded because of the way, and my colleague alluded to this, simply because of the way the process worked, the way it played out. The position of Chief Electoral Officer is critical because this is the position who, as an independent officer of this House, who administers each and every single one of our elections, referenda. This is the person who ensures a relatively small group of people for a very long period of time suddenly becomes a very large group of people. They grow to number in the thousands once that election is called. And that person, this position, must understand that each of these folks is not only trained appropriately, but also has to be empowered to make decisions on that day. That means the training needs to be absolutely impeccable and impeachable, so because they must not only respect the law and the act, but they also need to ensure that Albertans' trust in that position is not misplaced. The position is also tasked with educating all Albertans, including those under the age of majority, not just in terms of when and where, but also how to vote, what options might be available to them, and be prepared to answer all of those endless FAQs when folks happen to be confused. Ultimately, though, this is also a position that's entrusted with the sanctity of our electoral system, to make sure that everything runs smoothly, to make sure that if there is a fine that needs to be levied, it's levied fairly, to conduct those investigations, to ensure that candidates, whether they're affiliated with a party or whether they are independent candidates, not only understand requirements but are also able to simply follow them. And certainly in this era of social media, inflamed pronouncements, mis- and disinformation, and half-truths, the high level of trust that we need to place in both of these positions, but quite frankly, also in the position of Chief Electoral Officer, is essential. And all of that's borne out through process, a process that involves staff, that involves planning, that involves thinking about all possible scenarios that might indeed occur, and it is indeed one that ultimately involves Albertans because they are the ones who are voting. Oftentimes, and I heard this many, many times as a teacher, Madam Speaker, trust the process. But how can we trust the process when we know that there are gaps? And there were absolutely gaps in the decision-making ability of this committee. I will take a moment now and talk about another way in which we possibly could have approached this process. It would have been absolutely lovely, and this is sort of the teacher in me speaking, if there would have been some consensus. There is power in unanimity, and there is power in unity. Even if it's simply an agreement in principle, the power that's there is the power that happens along the way. But that does indeed, Madam Speaker, assume a level of collaboration, a level of compromise, a level of consensus that just didn't occur, and that's throughout the tenure of this committee. Over the term, as you heard earlier, the UCP changed their membership midway through, which resulted in the absence of a decision on a position that could have been made at the time, and in fact led to one of those new members participating in that decision-making process, in which I believe they should not have been a part of. Wasn't a way to end proceedings for one of those positions, and also wasn't a good way to begin proceedings for a second decision. And I certainly share my colleagues' opinion that it was clear that it was about political considerations that were paramount rather than the nature or importance of both of these independent positions. Previous processes, best practices, and agreed upon ways of proceedings were simply cast aside and overridden, and this is what led to the erosion of trust. And it's curious to me, Madam Speaker, because we have examples of many other jurisdictions throughout our country that don't operate in the same way. In fact, over in BC, neighbor just to the west of us, they demand a unanimous decision. Ontario had a unanimous decision, Manitoba, Saskatchewan. These are just a few of the jurisdictions in this country that indeed expect that there's going to be some sense of unity in terms of the committee that's making these incredibly important decisions on behalf of all citizens in their provinces. And quite frankly, there's a bit of beauty that's involved in working toward that sort of an agreement, because it shows that all of the folks on the committee, both sides of the House, believe in the importance of shared decision-making, shared ownership, and the ability to guide folks who differ in an opinion to a decision that's grounded in collaboration. Not only that, there's an understanding as well that the decision-making processes, because they're grounded in collaboration, compromise, and consensus, that those decision-making processes most often end, quite frankly, in better decisions being made. Particularly helpful when stakes are high, like they are with both of these positions. When there's high impact and complex decisions that need to be made, like when, as I mentioned, members are recommending who the latest independent officers of this legislature will be. The decisions that result are powerful. And a powerful example in this case to the electorate we all serve, because it shows confidence in the process and in the way in which that decision was made. Everyone knows that they were a part of that decision. But instead, and because those processes didn't allow for this, we're left with uncertainty, we're left with a lack of confidence and a lack of trust. Our caucus, as mentioned earlier, will of course work with the Assembly's choice in this matter, and we truly do wish them all the best as they move ahead. But I am, that being said, hopeful that members opposite understand that the undermining of trust in these sorts of positions that are so central to the working of our democracy and in the way in which these committees select these independent officers is serious and should be remedied, because Albertans deserve better. Thank you.
Any other members to government of motion 49? The honourable member for Edmonton-McClung.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I am pleased to rise to speak to this motion, which will appoint a new Chief Electoral Officer for the province. And I, first of all, would like to say we, should this motion pass, would welcome Mr. Gordon McClure to his new role as Chief Electoral Officer. The process by which this appointment recommendation is being made was not his fault. It was, as been described by previous colleagues of mine, a fumbled process, and it didn't have to turn out this way. But in any case, the appointment recommendation is being made by a majority government membership from the committee, and of course with us issuing a minority report, basically decrying the flawed process that we went through to get to this point. But I think the public should be aware that the process was fumbled, but also, Madam Speaker, I wanted to highlight in my remarks this afternoon the fundamental role that all the independent officers of the legislature play in our democratic process. Many members of the public, I think most members of the public, really are not aware of the absolutely critical importance of the independent officers of the legislature play, and how they, even though they operate largely behind the scenes and not often in the limelight, I can't imagine the province's government operating without them. In fact, well, I could imagine a government operating without them, and it would be a lot less accountable government than one would have given the role that they play. The independent officers of the legislature are a check against unbridled power in this government and in legislatures across parliamentary democracies globally. And there are elevated roles that are played by the independent officers of the legislature, and particularly in Britain, where the public accounts officer has the stature of a cabinet minister and an office to boot. So the independent officer of the legislature that we appoint today to the role of the Chief Electoral Officer is one of those fundamental pillars of the democracy that we hold true. And without them, Madam Chair, the public would soon become aware of their need. The Chief Electoral Officer is just one of those independent officers, Madam Speaker. The public should be aware, of course, that we spoke earlier of the Ethics Commissioner, the Child and Youth Advocate, the Auditor General, Information and Privacy Commissioner, the Ombudsman, the Public Interest Commissioner. All of these positions and roles are critically important to the function of our democracy and act as a check against, as I mentioned, unbridled government power. And if indeed we don't choose these individuals very, very carefully, we deprive ourselves of an opportunity to make sure that the government is held to account from a different vantage point, apart from the official opposition in the legislature. We hold, as members of the legislature and the official opposition, a large role in holding the government to account. But we don't stand alone, because those independent officers of the legislature play a role as they are appointed by the legislature to do, to focus on the actions of the government and make sure that they are adhering to the legislation that they are responsible for overseeing. And of course, that is so critically important when it comes to the Chief Electoral Officer appointment, who undertakes the role in a time when democracies the world over are under threat by right-wing populist movements that seek to undermine the very underpinnings of the government and societies that we hold dear, because they seem to think that the dictatorial power is more efficient and serves them better, whereas, of course, we in this legislature, and I believe all of us in this legislature should believe that the parliamentary democracies that we have intact currently should be preserved and defended against the current attacks that are ongoing globally from the far right. So with that, Madam Speaker, I won't say too many more things, but I will encourage the legislature to really demand that future committees that may be appointed to appoint legislative officers to their various positions over time as positions become vacant would really seek to enforce a role of greater collaboration and an opportunity for real nonpartisan debate in determining who's going to fulfill these positions, because Albertans expect that this element of our democracy is going to be led by individuals who are beyond reproach, led by individuals who are not seeking to satisfy a political master, but are actually looking to underpin and prevent the principles of democracy, act as a sober second thought, and guide the role of our democracy, guide the government to stay within its parliamentary guidelines and lane, and make sure that the faith that we currently still cling to in our parliamentary democracy is something that can be preserved. Because with appointments that are put into question, or a process leading to an appointment that is puts into question the trust that the public takes for granted right now in us to make sure we appoint people who are properly tuned in to do the role. If that trust is lost, Madam Speaker, we lose a fundamental underpinning of our democracy, and it will very much diminish the opportunity to hold the government to account from an administrative standpoint and from a neutral arbiter standpoint. So, Madam Speaker, I once again say to Mr. McClure, should he be appointed by this legislature and the recommendation be accepted, that we will work with him throughout his term to assure that his role is respected, and we look forward to his wisdom in decision making over his term in making sure that the Chief Electoral Officer role is able to fulfill its mandate and make sure elections in Alberta are held and conducted in a way that the public maintains its trust in our electoral process and our parliamentary institutions. Thank you.
Any other members to join the debates? The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint and Parkland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Right to speak in favour of motion of Government 49 regarding the report recommending the Select Special Ethics Commissioner and Chief Electoral Officer of the Committee regarding Alberta's next electoral chief officer. The search process lasted nearly a year. The committee provided a recommendation to Lieutenant Governor and Councillor Gordon McClure, appointed as the Chief Electoral Officer effective November 18th, 2024. Firstly, I'd like to thank all the members in a non-partisan fashion that participated in the committee, because it's critical to safeguard a democratic process, and although the members opposite may not like the democratic process when it takes place on those boards, when there's votes, etc., and they have different opinions, I can guarantee through you to those members and to the folks at home, Madam Speaker, that all due process was followed throughout the process of this special selections committee. There was nothing untoward, as it might have been alluded to. All processes and procedures followed as per the purview of the clerks. I would also like to thank the Legislative Assembly staff and Public Service non-partisan executive search team for the support in the process. So again, they were there right with us, guiding us through the process, helping out as much as possible. And I would also like to thank everybody who applied for this position. Not only were their resumes outstanding, there's a lot of good Albertans out there that really want to protect democracy. They want to go through it. There was highly qualified people given this very competitive market that's out there, knowing there's a ton of other elections going on. And not without some trepidation, I would imagine, for folks to put their head in that service of putting it all on the line, as it were, for not only those interviews, but moreover, what we're seeing here today, unfortunately, from the opposition in the House. There were several qualified candidates put their names forward. We came up through the process and through the committee, very happy to see that led to the right candidate being recommended. So, Mr. Speaker, or Madam Speaker, before I discuss Mr. McClure's credentials, I'd like to remind you and all the members of the House of what is expected of the Chief Electoral Officer. The appointment will serve as an independent officer of the legislature, so once they're in place, they're on their own. They are not beholden to anyone else but themselves, and except through legislative offices committee, obviously, for budget reviews and such. In that capacity, Chief Electoral Officer provides leadership and direction to Elections Alberta, ultimately ensuring all provincial enumerations, elections, by-elections, and plebiscites are conducted with accordance to law. This includes the Election Act, the Election Finances, Contributions Disclosure Act, and Senatorial Selection Act. I cannot understate the importance of this appointment and the grave responsibility of the Chief Electoral Officers. So by doing that, I wanted to emphasize all the roles and the credentials, and also give a little bit of an overview of Mr. McClure's biography and professional background. So I'm fully confident in his abilities. And again, on paper, it's interesting seeing the credentials, but when you have a chance to spend an hour with the individual in a room doing the Q&A back and forth, as it were, this gentleman, he definitely punched above his weight class from what I saw. Candidates were expected to have proven expertise in the interpretation and application of legislation, regulation policies. They're expected to have a working knowledge of the parliamentary system, government functions, and process in the public sector. They were also expected to have experience in decision-making at a senior level related to sensitive and complex issues. Madam Speaker, Mr. McClure has extensive knowledge of legislative and policy process, having worked on different government levels. His experience in senior level decision-making, managing budgets, project management. He also completed a program of tribunal justice from the Foundation of Administrative Justice and accredited as a qualified arbitrator. Madam Speaker, applicants were also expected to have a strong record of achievement in the execution level of public-private sector administration, overseeing significant fiscal and human resources. Mr. McClure brings a great deal of knowledge and experience to the role, having serving in the public for more than 26 years. Most recently, he served as the chair of the Public Lands Appeal Board and Appeals Coordinator for over 10 years. This is not an easy task. He literally is overseeing this board, and it has a lot of ramifications both in the public-private sector, and he's done exceptionally well there as well. He also served as Deputy Minister of Revenue and Financial Operations in the Yukon, and he did share with us, the gentleman that he was hired on to support ended up going on a leave not long after he was hired, and had solved some very complex issues, not only managing and taking a bunch of legacy program systems, throwing together, but solving the diesel crisis, as it were, up in the north. And if anybody's been up in that north country, diesel is the lifeblood to keep the lights on. So he had to figure out how to sort all that out on the fly and did exceptionally well. He served in Director of Business Services, Project Management, Department of Municipal Affairs with the Government of Alberta as well. Madam Speaker, applicants in the chief role of electoral office expect to have understanding of financial management practices, procedures, including financial statements, budgets, techniques. Mr. McClure was not only the Assistant Deputy Minister of Revenue and Financial Operation in the Yukon, but he also holds a Master of Public Administration from the University of Victoria. Madam Speaker, as I've highlighted, I am confident, absolutely confident, and respect the decision of the committee and the recommendation that we put here today that Mr. McClure will fully perform his duties with distinction as the Chief Electoral Officer, and I strongly encourage the Assembly to support the decision of the committee and to get this gentleman to work, because apparently there's a leaderless opposition next door that needs this person in place because no one there will give up their seat to actually let that guy come in here. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member of Edmonton City Centre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to rise and speak to Motion 49 regarding the appointing of a new CEO for Elections Alberta. Now, I had the honour for a few years to serve as the chair of the Standing Committee for Legislative Offices. And during that time in that position, I had the opportunity to oversee the search processes for multiple officers of the legislature. And having been through that process, indeed, I echo the praise that's been given and the thanks for the nonpartisan staff and search team that aid in that executive search and others. There are wonderful support because, as members have said, this is incredibly important work. We're appointing people to oversee significant responsibilities on behalf of the people of Alberta, investing them with a 4 or 5 year term to do so. And in this case, someone who will be overseeing elections in this province. And Madam Speaker, this is something that this government has indeed stated they are deeply concerned about. They are deeply concerned about communicating to Albertans the integrity of our elections, enough so, Madam Speaker, that they passed legislation forcing municipalities, school boards, to spend millions of extra dollars hand-counting ballots. Now, this is important to note as we talk about the appointment of this CEO, Madam Speaker, how serious that is for this government, that they say that the mere rumor, conspiracy theories that have been disproven, taken to court and proven false in the United States around the 2020 election are enough that we should spend millions of dollars here in the province of Alberta removing tabulator machines that have never been proven to make a mistake. So this is a government that indeed says it is incredibly important that we do everything possible to ensure Albertans can believe in the sanctity of our democracy. Indeed, they have gone so far as to potentially disenfranchise hundreds or thousands of Albertans by removing the ability to vote for voter ID. Because again, they claim that is essential to maintain trust in our elections in the province of Alberta. So when we speak about our concerns about this process, it is not, as the member for Lac St. Anne Parkland suggested, that we have a concern with the democratic process. Because indeed, the democratic process, Madam Speaker, simply means that there is a vote and the majority carries the vote and makes the decision. That is democracy. We recognize that's how things operate. We recognize that is that process, and we don't quibble with that at all. Our concern is with some of the other processes which took place. And having been the chair for multiple search processes, I can tell you there were some significant abnormalities in how these members chose to exercise the democratic process to proceed during this search process. One of the commitments that is made at the beginning of a search process, Madam Speaker, is that every member that signs up at the beginning finishes to the end, and if they need to step away, they are not replaced. Now, the reason for that, Madam Speaker, that you don't change horses midstream in a search process is because, as members have said, this is a very thorough process where you review resumes, where you sit down and you interview candidates. And Madam Speaker, I think everyone could agree, it is not possible to make a good informed decision if you have not been part of that process at each step of the way. But what we did see is that government members chose through the democratic process to replace one of their members just before the vote, after the resumes had been reviewed, after the interviews had been conducted, to replace one of the members that was there throughout that process with someone who had been present for none of it. That is a significant aberration of process. And Madam Speaker, if it is important enough that people have confidence in our elections that we need to spend millions of dollars counting ballots by hand, that we have to potentially disenfranchise hundreds or thousands of racialized or rural or senior Albertans, that it is important enough that we work to have a credible process. And we respect the decision that had been made, again, through the democratic process by the members of the committee at the beginning, that there would be no substitutions. That is the concern we have with the process, Madam Speaker. Now, Mr. McClure, we do not have a problem with Mr. McClure. We respect that he was chosen by the committee through the democratic process. We respect his history of public service. And we look forward to working with Mr. McClure, who indeed is going to be responsible for overseeing many of the drastic changes that this government has chosen to make in regards to elections. Many of the significant changes that they have made going into municipal elections next year. So I certainly do wish Mr. McClure well, and I look forward to working with him, and I think our members look forward to having the opportunity to converse with him when we meet with him to talk about his budget and business plan towards the end of this year. Though I do echo the concerns of my colleagues, once more, about that aberration of the process, chosen through the democratic process by the government members. And I certainly hope that in future search committees we will see a different decision, a different approach that will indeed ensure that Albertans have no reason to have any concerns, and to be sure that we are doing the best we can as legislators to make good decisions and to be seen to doing everything we can to make good decisions. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Any other members wishing to speak to Government Motion 49? Seeing none on, I will call the question on Government Motion 49 is moved by the Honourable Government House Leader. All those, he's not here. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. That is carried.
Under Government Bills and Orders for Second Reading, Bill 28, Meat Inspection Amendment Act 2024, the Honourable Mr. Sigurdsson.
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Immigration.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to move second reading of Bill 28, the Meat Inspection Amendment Act 2024. Madam Speaker, the proposed act will increase penalties as well as extend the limitation period to investigate an offence. If passed, the act will address the illegal slaughter of animals and the sale of uninspected meat. Alberta has seen an increase in the illegal slaughter of animals and the sale of uninspected meat, and these are serious offences, Madam Speaker. This is a health and safety risk to all Albertans, particularly children, seniors, and our vulnerable citizens who are at the highest risk of falling sick from contaminated meat. Madam Speaker, I'm here to propose actions that aim to deter offenders who are engaging in these illegal activities. The changes to the Meat Inspection Act propose 2 amendments designed to address these illegal activities. Recent investigations have shown that illegal meat sales are quite lucrative, in some cases involving large cash transactions. The current penalty of $10,000 for an offence is not strong enough to deter offenders. We need a much higher penalty, and that is why we are proposing to increase the current maximum fine to $100,000 for each offence under the Meat Inspection Act. Alberta is also seeing a rise in the number, complexity, and organized nature of these cases. with some offenders using a network of sellers, suppliers, and multiple slaughter locations across the province. The number of investigations involving illegal slaughter and sale of uninspected meat has been rising. Investigations led by my ministry alone nearly tripled between 2022 and 2023 and are expected to double again this year by the end of this year. Madam Speaker, these numbers are alarming. The current period to investigate is 1 year from the time the offense occurred, and given the complex nature of each investigation, this is not enough time. The level of criminal activity requires an extended limitation period to investigate and potentially bring charges against offenders. If passed, new legislation will increase the limitation period from 1 year from the date an offense occurs to 2 years from the date an offense comes to the attention of an inspector or a peace officer. Madam Speaker, the limitation period is the time allowed to investigate and lay charges for offences under the Act, and extending the limitation period allows inspectors to investigate thoroughly, thereby increasing the likelihood of a successful prosecution. The proposed increase in fines and limitation period will bring Alberta in line with other provinces and other Alberta laws. If we do nothing, we risk the health of Albertans and we risk harming the entire livestock and meat processing industry's reputation. To be clear, the sale of uninspected meat is illegal in Alberta. Any meat or meat product that is sold or distributed in Alberta must come from an inspected slaughter facility, abattoir, or processing facility. At these licensed facilities, inspectors are on site during slaughter to conduct inspections before and after every slaughter to ensure that meat is safe to consume and animals are handled and slaughtered humanely. We have 65 meat inspectors and food safety specialists in the province who help with licensing, facility inspections, and surveillance. It is important to note, Madam Speaker, that legal operations will not be impacted by these proposed changes. That includes our on-farm slaughter operations, which allows farmers to sell to consumers direct. Amendments apply only to those who commit an offense under the Meat Inspection Act. Before I close, I would like to add that $100,000 is a maximum fine and is imposed by an Alberta judge upon conviction. The ministry's compliance approach always begins with education progressing through several steps designated to encourage compliance with enforcement and potential prosecution only as the final step. Madam Speaker, it's important that Albertans remain confident in our food safety system and believe that this government will ensure a strong supply of safe, high-quality meat while helping to protect the reputation of our livestock industry. And with that, I'm pleased to move second reading of Bill 28, the Meat Inspection Amendment Act 2024. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I would now like to adjourn debate on Bill 28.
Having heard the motion to adjourn debate, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, please say no. So carried.
Under Government Bills and Orders for second reading, Bill 25, Early Learning and Child Care Amendment Act 2024, the Honourable Mr. Jones.
The Honourable Minister of Infrastructure, on behalf of the Honourable Minister of Jobs, Economy and Trade.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today on behalf of the Minister of Jobs, Economy and Trade to move second reading of Bill 25, the Early Learning and Child Care Amendment Act 2024. These amendments, if passed, will strengthen the trust Alberta families place in our child care system. Bill 25 is focused on preserving and promoting quality child care while protecting the health, safety, and well-being of our kids. With thousands of new child care spaces opening, our government is investing in Alberta's future to support our growing province. However, with rapid growth comes a responsibility to ensure safety and transparency remain a top priority. The proposed amendments will make our child care system safer for children while strengthening accountability and public confidence. By enhancing the capacities of the government's child care licensing team, the Act will enable swift action to ensure children are receiving the high-quality care they deserve. This includes temporarily closing a portion of a centre, suspending a family day home license and issuing a probationary license, requiring a provider to amend their program plans, and requiring family day home agencies to notify the programs that they oversee of any enforcement actions against them. New administrative penalties, which are already being used in many Canadian jurisdictions, would provide the government with another mechanism for enforcing requirements under the Early Learning and Childcare Act and its regulations. For example, if a compliance issue is identified in one room or in one part of a program, the entire operation doesn't need to close, preserving our high-quality and high-valued childcare spaces. This also means less disruptions for families. All of these changes would allow government to respond quickly when there are concerns about children's safety, providing flexibility in allowing childcare providers to address compliance issues in a portion of their premises. Madam Speaker, the vast majority of providers and educators are deeply committed to the safety and well-being of children in their care. However, there is always room for improvement and ways that we can better serve our kids. This legislation focuses on supporting good operators who provide quality care through their established curriculums and programming, while making sure the small number of bad actors receive meaningful consequences for their non-compliance. Repeat violators of established standards who remain non-compliant or even endanger children must be dealt with promptly. Madam Speaker, many families remember the devastating E. coli outbreak last year. This outbreak raised questions about what parents can expect from their government when child care providers are not following basic health and safety rules. And that's why, in this legislation, we are proposing amendments to address one of those recommendations from the Food Safety and Licensed Facility-Based Child Care Review Panel. This panel was struck to find ways to prevent large-scale outbreaks from ever happening again. Specifically, this legislation will address the recommendation to clearly state which applicable health and safety legislation applies to facility-based license holders. By updating the language in the Act to directly reference related legislation, including but not limited to the Public Health Act and the Safety Codes Act and municipal bylaws, we are making it clear that childcare facilities are being held to the same standards as other businesses. If Bill 25 passes, operators will have clarity and direction from this government on the responsibilities that they hold. In addition, the proposed changes will make the certification of an early childhood educator available to the public so parents can rest assured their children are in the care of trained and certified professionals. The Act will also ensure parents have easy access to vital information regarding any stop orders that have been issued by the government against unlicensed providers. We want parents to have information right at their fingertips about whether the provider that they're considering has a proven track record of safety and quality, and whether that provider is licensed or unlicensed. Lastly, these amendments will address and help address the growing demand for early childhood educators. The childcare sector is seeing recruitment challenges across the country, and we want to do our part to alleviate stresses and promote certainty. We also know that childcare means appropriate staffing levels. Updating the Act's regulations will clarify that certified 16 and 17-year-olds can work in a childcare facility while under adult supervision. This will present new opportunities for providers so they can be confident in hiring young people with an interest in early learning to support their programs. This will help providers maintain their staff-to-child ratios while creating new employment opportunities for youth. These changes represent our ongoing commitment to work with the childcare sector to make sure children are receiving the best care possible. Children deserve a safe, enriching learning and childcare experience that set them up for future success. Providers deserve support and clarity as they strive to meet high standards, and parents deserve to know that the child care system is worthy of their confidence. With that, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Jobs, Economy and Trade, I'm pleased to move second reading of the Early Learning and Childcare Amendment Act 2024. And with that, I'll adjourn debate.
I've heard the motion to adjourn debate. All those in favour, please say aye. Any opposed, please say no. So carried. The Honourable Government House Leader.
What a week it's been, Madam Speaker, but at this time I move that we adjourn the Assembly until 1:30 p.m. on Monday, November 4th, 2024.
Having heard that motion, all those in favour, please say aye. Any opposed, please say no. So carried. Now stands adjourned until Monday at 1:30. Happy Halloween.